What's up, everybody? I'm Nathan Graham Davis, and I'm going to re-break in as a Hollywood screenwriter.
So it's not quite 7 a.m. and I am not yet showered, haven't brushed my teeth or any of that, but I had to capture this moment because I am about to finish a script for the first time in years. And here we go. Final words. So that is awesome. I'm so excited right now. There's tons of work left to do. This draft definitely needs another week worth of tweaking before it's ready to go out to readers. I know I've got a lot of work to do in the early second act, especially just to set some things up. But that's 92 pages written. So freaking awesome.
So holy shit, that actually happened. I made this crazy plan to dive back into the screenwriting world and generate ideas and outline and write a first draft, all while doing this insane series and holding down my day job and trying to be a halfway decent family man. And, you know, for better or worse, that's basically what I did. It definitely helped to have the accountability that came with doing this whole thing so publicly, not to mention the guidance of all the people that you've seen along the way and several others. But despite the fact that this is my most ambitious script ever, for sure, and it's definitely going to require some rewrites, I'm pretty happy with what I've got so far, and I'm super excited to have this first draft done. So that's awesome. But this series is only like halfway-ish done because it is going to require some rewrites. So make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss the upcoming episodes. This week, I'm talking to Charley and Vlas Parlapanides, who are coming off of their hit Netflix show, Blood of Zeus. So we caught up about that and the difference that they found working in both TV and in film, how they outline and approach story, how they handle notes, and because I just finished my first draft, we talked about endings. So check it out.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you guys so much for taking some time to chat. I appreciate it. Hold on one second here. All right, there we go. Awesome. Guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I've been really looking forward to this, actually, especially coming off of Blood of Zeus, which was awesome.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So, I mean, it seems like Blood of Zeus has been a real hit, huh?
Thank God, Nate. We feel very lucky. You know, really performed well. Netflix is very happy. We were, you know, a top 10 show on Netflix in over, 80 countries for 10, 12 days. So, did really well. We always say, this isn't our story, this is Greece's story. And I just think it shows the strength of Greek mythology and the appeal of it, because we perform well in countries that they never thought we would. So it's been great. Thank God.
I mean, like, that's like what like a dream come true type scenario, huh? Like, it's awesome.
Very gratifying. Before we even get into it, I feel like I should get some books and have some books back here. I think that's a really good idea.
I need to fill them more, is what needs. Actually, so I built out this this room in this attic. I started building it in, I don't know, September or something, and because I had books overflowing everywhere, and now I've got bookshelves all around me, and I've realized I don't have enough books to actually fill all the shelves that I now have. So I feel like I've got an excuse to buy more.
It's great that you're handy. We always love that story with Arthur Miller, where, what was he building, a shed, bro? What was he building?
I don't know about this story.
Oh, it's great. Share the story with him.
Well, he was building a shed in his backyard. Not a shed. It was actually like a little writing room, just like a little studio for him to write in. Yeah. And he was spending weeks and weeks, and he had told his wife, like, listen, I have this new idea for a play, and I'm gonna start writing it. But he was spending weeks and weeks building this kind of little studio shed outside that would be kind of like a writer's retreat. And like 3 weeks went by, and his wife's like, what are you doing? I thought you were going to be writing. He's like, I am writing. I'm thinking. I'm working out the story. And the day he finished the shed, that night he sat down and he wrote the whole first act that night. of Death of a Salesman. And you know how that is, Nate. Like that's part of writing. You know, the rest is just stenography. You know, it doesn't always have to be paper to pen.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that I've been as productive as a result of building all of this, but it was really cool to do it. So, but I knew that I wanted to do this whole project, and I knew that I needed a place to be able to get away where there was a little bit less sound, and so it's worked out really well for that. But anyway, guys, so yeah, congratulations. I mean, that's it's absolutely amazing, dream come true type stuff. Which obviously, have you guys written other series type stuff before, or is this the first time that you went out with anything like this?
This is the first.
Vlas, you can tell them.
Yeah, this is the first time we got to work in the long format, and that was incredibly gratifying. You know, before that we had, Immortals was produced. That was a feature, and then Death Note. And as you know, being in this business, films are director driven. I mean, that's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
And it's the way it should be too. At the end of the day, the director gets to decide what the story is going to be. And, Charley always jokes around, and he's right about it. If you end up not doing what the director wants, then he's going to bring on a writer that does what he wants. And that's just how it works. And that's the business we're in. And we always try to facilitate and do the best job we can when we're brought on a project. And we certainly have grown since we first started. We got rewritten on Immortals by 2 other writers, and obviously got rewritten on Death Note, and they had shared credit. I think Jeremy Slater did a great job with that, the work that he did on that project. And this was the first time where we were involved from inception of idea through till the very end. And for better, for worse, it was a story that we wanted to tell. And we were blessed to work with a very talented director and a group of very talented people. And we got to tell the story we wanted to tell. So it was very gratifying, both creatively and professionally. And it was also nice to work in this space where, you got to spend a little more time with the characters, because it was 8 episodes.
Yeah.
About a half hour each.
We had developed in TV before. We developed, a couple shows, and there were 2 shows we got right down to the very end. It was between us and another project. There was one script I remember, a pilot we wrote at CBS that we were very proud of, and people always, ask us about. But it came down to us in the show Intelligence, where the guy got a chip in his head, and we lost out to that. And then there was a legal show we wrote at ABC that I still think is a great idea, and someone should make it a show. But when they said, they literally, the person who was the number 2, she goes, "I love your script. If it was me, I would pick this one. But Paul Lee, who was the number 1 guy there, it's between you and another legal show." And I'll never forget, the producer on our project got us the script of the other legal show. And I read 20 pages of, they're going to pick this one, because our show, we didn't have enough soap and sex. Like in that one, there was like a love triangle, in the first 15 pages. And I'm like, oh my God, like, I don't care what you say. Like, ours was a better script. It was a better premise. It would have been a better show, but it didn't have the sex that you need for ABC and the soap element.
You just kind of knew that's where it was heading, huh?
You never know. It is a subjective business, and it's something that we always remind ourselves. Because sometimes you get to write something and then you have to do a rewrite, and it's like, okay, well, it's A or B, and it's not necessarily one's better than the other. Sometimes they're just different, and it's just someone's own personal taste.
Is there any hope for those down the road at all, or
you never know?
It's not like features.
Yeah.
But you see there's a big difference, and there are exceptions, but in features, a feature can always come back to life with like a new actor, a new director. In TV, once they don't get picked up, especially at the network level, it's a busted pilot. And like it doesn't, because they used to churn through so many of them. I think the idea of always kind of digging back into the catalog just seems like too difficult, because we had asked that a couple times, and they're like, no, it's over, it's that.
It is bizarre that there's that stigma, because as Charley said too, when you take meetings, you can tell right away, how an executive genuinely feels about whatever they've read. And the Centurion, which is that, pilot that we had at CBS that got really, really close, that lost out to Intelligence. Man, when there was another project we did at Fox, and the producers had read the Centurion, and Vin Diesel was attached to this when it was Medal of Honor. They loved it, like to the T. You could see that excitement, and they're like, whoa, there's like genuine, like I remember Chris Morgan, who was the executive producer on that, the writer of Fast, and he goes, you guys,
yeah,
that's very hard to do. You guys, you genuinely surprise people. And they had that big surprise, like 7/8 into the pilot. And we were always very proud of that. And then there was another exec that we worked with at MGM. He's like, I love that script. And so you can just see the enthusiasm when they talk about it. So that's what it makes it a little frustrating that there is this stigma that it's like, oh, well, if it didn't get produced, there must be a reason why. Well, who knows why? It could be literally just that top person saying, I like this one a little bit more than that one.
Yeah.
And so there shouldn't be a stigma. And I think, as Charlie mentioned, there isn't a stigma in features, but for some reason in TV, that lingers. I don't know why it is that.
Yeah, I mean, in features, you hear stories all the time about something that got made, 10, 12 years later,
Yeah.
So
most of the films we love
constantly.
Most of the films we love got made that way. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Right. So you think that would be a great source for TV material too, to go back and dig through the archives, and obviously it means that they're spending a lot of money on development too if they're just developing new slates constantly. So
yeah, that's one of the big things that's changing, and it'll be interesting to kind of see where this all goes, because the TV business has been completely upended. It used to be that the network TV schedule, for those of the people out there that are watching that aren't familiar, it used to be that after 4th of July, all of the major networks, the big four major networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox, after 4th of July, from 4th of July kind of into Labor Day or into the middle of September, would hear pitches. And that's all they would do. They would hear 4 or 5 pitches, 6 pitches a day. And from those, they would usually buy about 50 dramas and 50 comedies. So they buy about 100 projects, each network. And then from those, 100 projects, they would make pilots of 12 to 15 of them. And of those 12 to 15 pilots, they would pick up 6 to 8 shows,
sure.
But what was kind of nice is that, okay, you pitch from 4th of July until Labor Day, mid-September. Then everyone would go off and write outlines, and then you would try and get your script in before the holiday break, before everyone took off. And then in January, they would decide which, pilot scripts they were going to produce. And then there would be, oh, well, we got to get directors and actors. And that would kind of go into, February and March. And then March and April, they would film those. And then by May, they'd be deciding which shows they're picking up. And then you'd have upfronts, and then there'd be a little break. And then the whole thing would start all over again. But now, and then kind of what people would do with cable is that whenever there was kind of a down period in the network schedule, that's when agents would say, go pitch cable. This is the time to go pitch. And that's when they were able to focus on helping get projects out there and pitching cable networks. So there was a kind of rhythm and season and calendar to the year. But ever since the streamers and cable have exploded in, say, the past 10 years, now it's just like anything goes. You pitch anytime. Even networks will hear pitches almost any time of the year. And it's a little kind of like, and networks now are buying less and doing more of kind of what the streamers are doing. The streamers, when they buy something, you're much more likely to get it made.
Is that true?
If you sell to a streamer, it's much more likely to get it made, but it's harder to sell to them. Whereas with the networks, it was easier to sell to them, but there's less chances of it getting made. So they're both now kind of moving towards a middle, but the whole thing's changing.
I'm curious to see now after COVID, because I think they bought even less. Wouldn't you say this season?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did they?
What the new normal is going to be? I'm just curious, in terms of where they're like, oh wow, we can even buy less, or will they go back up to what they bought 3 years ago or what have you? I'm curious to see how, I'm curious to see what the new normal is going to be.
What I've been hearing a lot of is that TV has a better outlook than features, but you're saying that TV is being cut back as well, huh?
Development is, and part of it is COVID threw a big curveball. COVID has killed everything. People cannot minimize the damage it's done to our business. Features right now are dead. No one is buying, no one is developing. There was talk when this first kicked off that hey, listen, when this started in March, okay, for 6 months, we'll all kind of hunker down, but we'll still spend money in development because hopefully there'll be kind of a path to production for the fall or maybe the summer. Worst comes to worst, 2021 first quarter, we'll get everyone back out on the door working. But because that didn't happen and the numbers just keep going up and productions get stalled because you have positive COVID tests, and it's the testing is expensive. The delays are expensive. Everyone now is pulled back. So right now, the feature business, big projects are going out with top level people, and they're just saying, come back to us next year. It is dead. The feature business is dead. And now the TV business, it's a little more transactional, but even that's way, way down. So the impact COVID has had on the business is huge.
We've had execs tell us, like, normally say, hypothetically, I'm just throwing out a number. They said, we would have 10 projects. Now, because of everything that's happened, they're being much more selective. And because COVID is making things more expensive, they're saying, we're doing 7. We're going to do 6. So they are cutting back.
Like, we were asking a few months ago, like, we were talking with our manager, like, I don't even know what to tell people, like, how to break in. Like, when you sold something, when we first started, it was like, write a feature spec. And like, I don't know if that's true anymore. Now, if you write a great feature spec, that will still open all the doors, because again, that's still viewed, but part of it is like, it's so hard to sell stuff now in the feature space, thankfully, like Netflix and Amazon are buying more features, but at the traditional studios, it's so hard to sell. It feels like a small target.
But, listen, on the upside, entertainment is something that is needed, and people,
especially now,
people are watching more Netflix. They are watching more HBO, Max. They're watching, movies and television shows. So there's a demand for it.
For sure.
And it's the best of times and worst of times. It's the worst of times in the sense that everyone has just stopped spending money. But as you mentioned, Nate, everyone is consuming content, and the streamers need content now more than ever. So, and this is still the cheapest form of entertainment as compared to, like, traveling or going to a concert or other things that aren't going to happen, even after a vaccine rolls out. So I do think that things will open up again in the new year, hoping, knock on wood, because they need to replenish, the content supply line. So in that sense, it's, more than ever will be needed. But right now, this kind of fall into winter has been just dead zone.
Got to weather that storm.
That's rough, guys. So you're obviously not quitting the feature game, though, because you just sent me. Is it okay if we talk about Killinger at all? Or
sure.
That's cool. Awesome, by the way. It was packed with stuff that I've never seen in a movie before, which is great. So super cool. But so you're going out with this now or close to it? Is that right?
We're in a holding pattern. We're in a holding pattern. We have to wait until the new year.
So, okay. Well, we're after Thanksgiving right now anyway.
You know how normally after Thanksgiving, basically people out, watching on YouTube might not know that, like, basically Hollywood kind of shuts down. There's kind of the last 2 weeks of December, all the major agencies shut down, which forces all the major studios to kind of shut down. So the first 2 weeks of December are basically like, holiday parties and gift baskets. And it's very, very kind of like low key. And then the last 2 weeks, it's like skeleton crews. So normally what happens is after Thanksgiving, everything's dead until January until Sundance rolls in. And then everyone kind of gets back to work. This year with the election, everyone kind of shut down like the beginning of November. And then with COVID, it was slow before that. So it's been a really quiet fall.
I didn't realize that things had pretty much shut down after the election. So that's interesting.
It's very interesting. It's the first time that's happened. And it's something that our, people in the industry have shared with us, more than one person, and you could just feel it. And when Charley, mentioned before, you had A-list director, A-list star going to, HBO Max and being like, and they're just like, sorry.
Or to any of these big outlets, they're just saying, crazy. Like, come back in 2021.
Like, 6 years ago, for like the couple years that I was in this game, you didn't need both an A-list director and an A-list star to get something done. Usually if you had one of those attached, that was pretty good.
I do think that's if this wasn't COVID and it wasn't this exact moment in time, which again, this is the first time we've had a pandemic in 100 years. So listen, we always say, like, in this business, literally anything can happen. We once pitched a project. The head of production at a studio said he was going to buy it. Then if we were to tell you the craziness that happened, none of which was our fault, we had nothing to do. It was all shenanigans behind the scene. The whole project went away. And it's like, we didn't do anything. We spent 3 months working our ass off. You get the head of production and say, I love this. I'm buying it. I have business affairs. Call your lawyer. You think, great, there's a job. And then in 10 days for just go poof, like offline, we will tell you what happened, but it's like crazy. So we've learned that literally anything in this business can happen, and it sometimes does. And if you have an actor and director, I'm sure that project will go out again, you know, in the new year, and they will sell it and it'll go forward. But it just goes to show what a strange time it is right now. This kind of COVID Hollywood, you know, where we're at right now. But the one thing I would say is that no one out there should be discouraged, because again, more than ever, these streamers and these studios are going to need content. And the great thing about being a writer, unlike all the other disciplines, is that you don't need anyone's permission to do what we do. It's not like being a director where someone has to hire you, or you're an actor, someone has to cast you. If you have an idea, you sit down, you write it, you get it as good as it can be. And eventually the doors are going to open again and people are going to start buying. But just right now, if anyone's watching and they think like, oh, I have a great script and I should be reaching out to managers, like, just forget it. Just wait until January, or keep trying, but know that they might be saying no. And maybe someone will read, you know, but they're not going to be able to do anything right now to help.
Yeah, it's a rough time to send query letters for sure. It's always a rough time to send query letters, but right now is especially rough. So, yeah. Well, I'm glad that you said it's not entirely dead though, because you know, I'm probably going to be finishing the first draft of this feature in the next couple days. So it'd be really sad if there was nothing I could do with it. So, but it's almost done. So, or first draft anyway. I'd love to talk to you guys a little bit about how you approach your endings. If you've got some insights on that, or you know, if you've got certain things that you keep in mind or process to it. Does it change every time, or do you have things that every single time you're working on something, like these are the things you're trying to hit in terms of an ending?
It depends if it's a feature, if it's like a, you know, a pilot, whatnot. With features, we, for the most part, take the approach that guys like Alan Ball take, or Francis Ford Coppola, in that they know their characters, they know, you know, the characters very well, they know what they've done, and, you know, and have lived right up to the moment the story begins. And then they know the plot point at the end of Act 1, and they know their ending. And so they try to, you know, because you, in terms of like outlining it in great detail or keeping the outline a little more loosey-goosey, for features, it's a little more loosey-goosey, so that you can discover. And I feel like, you know, if we've done our work, our homework well enough, if we really know our characters, they almost kind of, the story writes itself in many ways. And you get those kind of surprises that I think you probably wouldn't get if you detailed, you know, had a very, very detailed outline. I think
I agree with you.
Yeah. And for some people though, like, the outline frees them because they're able to deviate from it, and they know they have kind of a safety net of sorts underneath them. So it actually helps them in a way. So it just really depends, you know, on the writer and just kind of what works for you. But for the most part, we've known our endings, and then we've reversed engineered. Not always. Sometimes, you know, you'll discover an ending. There was, you know, that was a case for one of the scripts, but really get to know your characters, do that research. You know, Sid Field talks about doing the research, and Charley and I are huge on research. There's the physical research where you read the books and you watch the movies in that genre. And then there's also that research, like we said, when you're building the shed, the apartment, whatever it may be, where you're just thinking about the characters, and you're thinking about the story, and you're thinking about how things should unfold. And you're, you know, that's research too, and that takes time. And so hopefully you can combine the two, and we do both. And I think we've also, or I would say, you know, I appreciate doing research much more. I wish we had, you know, more of that when we first started in terms of doing that type of research. We still did, but I think we've taken it, you know, to even a much greater extent, you know, at least these last couple of years. What would you say, bro?
No, I think part of it is, you know, Nate, I'll never forget when we first started in the business, we had a general with Ortsy Kurtzman, who, you know, were very prolific writers, and you know, they, you know, wrote the Star Trek reboots and some of the Michael Bay Transformers movies. And they said, listen, in TV, you are very beholden to your outline. And when when you write TV, you know, especially when you're developing a network show, they have these like story documents they make you do, and then they do an outline, and the outline is literally basically like the script without words. Like you can write it in final draft. But they go sometimes in features, there's guys that are very good outline writers, but that outline doesn't translate to a script. And what we found, and this is just for us because the process is different for everyone. And I kind of think, you know, you kind of alluded to the fact that you might be like us. We're like, we just need to know the broad strokes, but then we want to discover and find it. And the story will kind of lead us. We know where we're swimming. We know the shoreline, but then just let it happen naturally. Because sometimes if you're too beholden to an outline in a feature, like this doesn't make sense. And now that we're actually in there and the rubber meets the road, like we can't go from this beat to that beat. We need more time here.
You have to change a lot along the way. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of in between. So for the script that I'm doing right now, I wrote an outline. It was about 7 pages long. You know, a paragraph kind of for most of the scenes and whatnot. And I probably kept about half of it, you know, and then a lot changed along the way. And I already know, I don't know if you guys ever experienced this, but I'm writing, you know, from page 1 all the way to the end. I know some other writers do that differently. But I know I'm going to have to go back and throw out 15 pages in the beginning of the second act and, you know, completely redo that just because of how things changed as I was discovering what the movie was, you know?
Yeah. Sometimes
that's the process.
Yeah.
That's the process.
There's 2 things that come to mind. It's interesting though, that Charley said too, you know, with regards to those television, those outlines, those actually we enjoy doing, to be honest. Like, and now part of it is that we were blessed to have been working with just great, you know, executives and great producers. So, you know, for the pilot, for the Centurion, and for the other one that we did at ABC, it was fun to write a very detailed outline. It just kind of worked in TV. I don't know why exactly, to be honest, but like we enjoyed that process. So I guess we're lucky that we can traverse and we can do both. But when you talk about
definitely, that's cool.
Discovering it, I mean, just Ocean's 11, you know, that's the perfect example. The writer wrote that whole script. He's like, oh my God, why is he doing this? He's doing it for the girl. And then he's like, I rewrote the whole thing. So like that happened.
But he didn't realize that till he got to page 100.
I didn't know that about Ocean's 11. That's great.
Yeah. And he didn't realize that to Charley until he got page 100, whatever it is. And it was like a light bulb went off. So that is part of the process. And good writing, as we always say, is rewriting. So, you know, or like The Sixth Sense, you know, M. Night Shyamalan wrote, I think.
Yeah, didn't he do like 8 drafts of that or something like that?
He said like 19. So, I'd read like
scenario.
It was a lot. And literally he would write by hand. So, you know, at one time, I think Bruce Willis was a cop, and he was like all these different, that Bruce Willis character was a cop, and it was like all these different iterations of it. So I think sometimes you have to just, you know, kind of find it, you know, and then that's very gratifying too, when you're like, oh, This is what it's about. Yeah. Now, listen, every writer.
One thing though, too, I will say is that features is still, to me, the hardest discipline. And it's by far the hardest bullseye to hit, because like, you know, when you look at pilots, it's 50 pages. And lots of times, like a good network pilot, the first 15 pages, you're setting up your character, you're introducing some dilemma. And then really the next 30 pages is like the first act of a movie, is really what it is. And I think when it comes to outlining 50 pages, you can do that well and kind of still, and then there's always, you know, tweaking and adjusting, but because you're only doing 50 pages, but when you go to 110 pages or 115 pages, it's just a different animal. It's just different. And I don't think that anyone can have the insight to kind of arc out a whole story perfectly and see it perfectly from that format. Now, I'm sure there's people that do it, but for us, it's not that way.
I tried it that way once. You know, early, it was probably like the 3rd or 4th script that I ever wrote. And I really did write every single beat, almost like you do it as TV. And that is the worst script I've written. So, you know, I didn't even go back and do a second draft of that one. I was just like, you know what? Nope, I'm just moving on. So,
but you know, it's smart that you did that too, because sometimes people hold on to something and they try to, there is a point like where you have to tell yourself, you know what, I got to move on and I got to go on to the next one. And, you know, so that's so interesting though. Very.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I know everybody's got a different process, but it did not work for me. But it's really interesting to hear that you guys found that it worked so well for the TV. So for Blood of Zeus, obviously you had, you know, basically beat sheets, I would assume, right? Like, and everything was really, really done out. Did you have to iterate a lot to find all of those, or?
Well, what's great with Blood of Zeus, and Charlie talks about it all the time, that's 22 pages, 20 to 22 pages. Mm-hmm. Now listen, that's also a challenge in that you only have so much.
It's like comic books or something like that in a way, like just it's a similar length per episode.
It's you know, we haven't had the experience to actually to write, you know, in comics. Obviously we've read a lot of comics, so I guess that, you know, you can draw some parallels. But I agree with Charlie though. I think that because TV, you're dealing with 50 pages, or in our case, say like 22 pages, whatever it is easier to outline that. But when you try to outline something that's like 115 pages, it is almost too much. I bet that's the reason why. And listen, again, like he said, there might be someone out there that does that and is very good at doing that. We don't know who those people are, but for Blood of Zeus, you can tell them, bro, kind of what we went through.
You know, the one thing I was gonna say first though, Nate, you mentioned that story, just throwing away the script. I remember Eric Roth, we saw him speak at a WGA event, and he goes, the way you know you're a writer is that you're 30 pages in, 50 pages into a script, and you realize it's not working, and you throw it away and you start over on page 1, or you start over on a new idea. He goes, most people, they get 30 pages and they either like, oh, they quit and they never touch the thing again and they never write again. Or they just like power through even though they know it's not working. And so being a writer is just, again, we always say that thing Oliver Stone said, writing is ask plus seek. That's the equation. And you just keep grinding. Right. And being willing to kind of get back in the arena and get back in the ring and keep going. That's the key to writing. There's no secret. Like to us, that's what it's always been. And I even give
No,
go ahead, bro.
No, I even give you more credit because you did that whole outline and then you wrote the whole script and then you so I give you even more credit.
I mean, that was 10 plus years ago now, you know, it was a long time ago, but I just kind of knew at that point I was still figuring out what type of writer I was, you know, so it was very early on, you know, for me.
We always tell people you have to write 5 or 6 scripts until you're to just learn to just know how to do it. And then like what you hope is that your taste and your ability start to, you know, kind of merge, you hope, you know what I mean? But again, it just takes time. It's a muscle. Writing is a muscle. And just like you have to work your body to develop your muscles, you have to write to develop your writing muscle. And it just takes time.
Yeah. My 7th was the first one that I'll show people. You know,
that's great.
And that's an action comedy, and I haven't written anything in that space since. So, you know, it wasn't until probably the 8th where I kind of started to discover where I really wanted to work, you know? So, it takes a while.
It was the same for us. Nate. And the one thing I'll say that's nice, we were talking about Blood of Zeus, like, you know, the outlines for Blood of Zeus, they were like 3-4 pages, but it's just like, and we would, you know, we basically, when we pitched Netflix the idea, they really liked the idea. And John Derderian, the executive there, said, listen, I really like this. If you write a pilot, which is only 22 pages, and a Bible, 10, 12 pages outlining the arc of the first season. He goes, if you guys write that, if I like it, not only will I buy it, but I promise to make it. And so we were just like, we got to do this.
All right.
We've always loved this story.
How do you turn that down?
Had it in our back pocket, and we just did it. And so we wrote the pilot. He and the Bible, and he called us, says, guys, I love this. We're going to do it. Let's figure this all out. And then what happened was that we would do these little mini outlines, and then they would approve them, and then you just go write the script. And when you're working with 22 pages, and also, you know this with features, you're always fighting Chekhov's gun. Like anything you set up in features, you have to pay off. And for the people out there, you know, Chekhov said that, like, if you have a gun on the, you know, that's on the mantle, you know, in the first act, if someone doesn't pick it up and use it by the third act, the gun doesn't belong there. So in features, everything you set up has to pay off. Whereas in TV, it's a little more fungible. You can let certain threads, you know, drag out. They can bleed into other episodes. They can bleed into other seasons. As long as you're kind of arcing out the main story, it's just, again, it's a little bit easier of a target to hit, in our opinion.
So did you enjoy that freedom that you got out of that, to kind of just work in a different way like that? Not to mention, was it always intended to be animated? I assume it was, just because of how big it went. But yeah, I mean, there's no budget concern. I mean, you can just go crazy, you know. So, and that's what it was, right? I mean,
it's yes or no, whether you can go crazy. You know, it was interesting going through this process. We had kind of that same opinion that you had. Oh, you can just do anything. Well, you can certainly tell a story that if you say, okay, can this story be made in the live action space? And there's no way, because it would just be too much. It would be too expensive. It would be 250 million, whatever.
Right.
Million. So there is that component of it. So you get to tell a story that has, say, like these massive kind of set pieces, but there are financial constraints in that, you know, you only have so much time and you only have so much manpower. And what was interesting about it, I thought initially when we went into this, it would be somewhat similar to Pixar, where they sit down, they see the movie, and they're like, oh, well, we can change this sequence and that sequence and this and that, and like literally remove a whole sequence and like work on a whole character. We didn't have that luxury. We could modulate things, but we couldn't just kind of throw things out. So in fact, there was more pressure to get the scripts to be as right as we could possibly get them. Wow, because that was it. Like once that got animated, you can modulate things a little bit, but there weren't these like massive cuts that you could make, or, you know, we didn't have that type, of these huge, like there weren't reshoots or revisions or something like that. So there was a lot of pressure to make sure to get the scripts right. And yes, we could tell a story that budgetarily we couldn't tell, say, hypothetically in the live action space, but we did have parameters that we had to work within. And so, you know, budget ended up being, though we had a very healthy budget and we're very grateful for Netflix giving us that budget, you know, it wasn't like this massive budget where we could just do anything we wanted, you know, which was kind of like a surprise and a learning experience.
That is
what was funny, Nate. It was interesting. The executives at Netflix, when we started, we asked them, you know, like, listen, we know traditionally like a script is like 20, 22 pages. Is it okay if this one's like 25 or 26? Like, yeah, they're like, just write whatever you think, like use your imagination, let it run wild. And so that's what we did. And some of the scripts were longer, but then when they hired the director, Sean, he's like, guys, listen, all the scripts have to be 20 to 22 pages and there can't be more than 7 pages of action, or else we can't, because we're only budgeted to animate 21 and a half minutes, and we can only have, you know, 300 shots per episode. And so then we spent like weeks kind of like, you know, we pulled out 30 pages from the 8 episodes before we recorded and did the audio record. So, but in a way, it actually was good because we were uninhibited and we wrote on a really large kind of scale, but then we did have to, like, we lost lots of stuff that still kills us. But it was a good balance because we ended up getting what we got.
It's funny that you're saying that, because that actually, so I haven't, this one comes out on Friday, but last week I spoke with Malcolm Spellman and he was talking about how, you know, if you're writing to page count, you kind of subconsciously do all these, you make all these compromises where you don't write certain things because, you know, you're trying to hit a page count. And so you just have to let go of that and let yourself write everything. And then you'll condense that 5 pages to 2 pages or whatnot. And you get the best version of that scene. And it's kind of, you know, what you guys are talking about there is you went crazy and then you were forced to cut it down, but you already had everything that you needed to make it work. So you just got the best version of it, you know?
I think that's great advice. And that's a good reminder for all writers, including us, you know, because sometimes, we say, hey, you know what? No, like this is going to be cut. No, I'm always more to like write it. And even if it's overwritten, and that always stems back from an article that I'd written about, that I'd read, that Clifford Odets, you know, talked about the writing process. And he also worked with Ernest Lehman, and he worked with the director, and it was for the Burt Lancaster film, oh man, now I'm drawing a blank, which I absolutely
Sweet Smell of Success.
The Sweet Smell of Success. And it's so funny because Odets would come in and he would just like write the shit out of a scene and put so much in there. And it was, the exposition was in the dialogue and this, and then he would get like, kind of like talk with the director, and the director's like, but you know, he wouldn't say it like this, he was in this. And he's like, and then he would take like what he'd written on the page and use like a paragraph, but that little paragraph was like that little bit of gold. And the only way you could kind of get there was by writing all this other stuff. And it's like kind of what you had mentioned before, there's that discovery process. So like, I like taking that approach. It's probably not efficient. It probably drives even, you know, Charley crazy. He's like, what the fuck? You know, but it's what we have learned in this process is that we trust it, because also too, like, you know, we have it in the outline, and then we're going to write the script, and then people are going to give us notes on the outline. They're going to give us notes on the script, and then we're going to even record things. And, you know, just because we've done all those things doesn't mean it's going to make it into the show. Even things that we've recorded, we took out a lot of lines. We also put lines back in, though, that helped, ones that had been taken out that did have an impact. So you just kind of trust the process. And as long as people keep it ego free, and it's always about best idea wins, I think you come to a good place.
What's your process like when you guys are working together on this type of stuff?
To be honest, like, you know, Charley, just, I've been blessed that he has the great big ideas, and the ideas are the foundations from which we build these stories, these shows, whether it's the, you know, feature or the television show. And, you know, Charley says it, and I agree with him. You're only as good as the big idea that you're writing. And then, you know, it's about building out the characters, spending that time really getting to know the characters, which is also a lot of fun. And yeah, and then it's just, you know, writing scenes and then giving them back and forth and rewriting each other. And then, you know, it's also too one of those things, it just helps to be, you know, to have a writing partner, because like an idea will come, and then maybe that idea doesn't work, but it sparks another idea. And then that leads to this other idea that finally leads to ultimately, you know, the best version or the best idea, that, or the idea that's best for the story or the character. So it helps to have that sounding board too.
There's something about the way like subconscious works, like where you, when you're talking about it, it just, it allows it to come out in a way that it wouldn't if you were just sitting there staring at the screen by yourself. So I imagine having a writing partner for that reason alone is awesome. Although I also imagine it's probably challenging at times, or at least at first, you know. I mean, I know it took me a long time to find my voice as a writer. I can't imagine trying to find a voice with another person and figuring that out together, you know, and what that sounds like.
It's, you take the best from both, you know, and you hopefully, you know, kind of, you know, take the strong suits from each and kind of funnel them into the work. Sydney, it's not Sidney Lumet, bro, it's the other Sydney, talked about like talking it out and walking. The guy that did The Way We Were, and Sydney
Sydney Pollock.
Yeah, I was like
yeah, because you mentioned like, you know, as you walk and talk, and Charley and I do that, we walk and talk. He would always walk and talk with his writer. He was an actor, you know, and I guess, you know, wasn't a real writer, but that walking and talking and just kind of, you know, talking about the characters in the story, I think that's helpful. I think, you know, you can, you know, I think it's very helpful to develop the story that way, just talking it out. And we do that, or at least we did that when we were in the same room together.
Right.
We have a little office that, you know, we haven't been in since March, but we used to walk all the time around the block that the building was at. I remember like the one woman, you know, that worked at, you know, Pollo Loco, she's like, what do you guys do? I always see you guys walking.
That's
like,
funny.
You know, I went in there one time to like grab a quick, you know, lunch. She's like, I always see you and this other guy walking around. What do you guys do? I was like, oh, sorry. Yeah. You know, we're not loitering. We're not vagrants. We're writers. You know, it's my brother. And but you just walk and talk, and it's just, writing is just problem solving and building each little brick on top of the next brick. Yeah. And I do think it helps. And we were, you know, a very big Greek family. We all, our parents had a bunch of small businesses, so we all worked together growing up. So this was very kind of second nature, you know. It was well entrenched in us from adolescence, you know.
And walking too, I read an article and I shared it with Charley. It's statistically proven. There's something about walking. It's not running. Running, it doesn't apply. When you walk, somehow the pace of a walk somehow helps helps your mind kind of work things out. And someone wrote a whole article about it, about the pace and the rhythm of walking is something that's very beneficial to people that have to solve problems and people that are thinkers. And it's not the same for people that are jogging. You don't get that same benefit for
Yeah, well, I completely agree with that, because I run a lot, and I never have any good ideas when I'm running. It just doesn't happen. But I think there's a benefit to clearing the mind, you know, that comes with working out and exercise and all that. So
oh yeah,
so
and the stress level, yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, people tell me that they have ideas and stuff when they run, and I just don't know how. It doesn't work that way for me at all. So,
me either.
But yeah,
I will
walking,
tell you,
I think
Nick,
it's easier.
You talked about the subconscious, and I'll never forget, we sold a script to Alcon, and they produced Blade Runner 2049, which I loved. I thought that film was a masterpiece. And I had asked them, like, what was it working with Denny? Because I think he's one of the best directors working right now. And they were telling us, and he said, like, they had asked him some question, and he said, well, listen, that one I still have to dream about more. And I always thought that was like a great answer.
That's a cool comment. Yeah.
Yeah, and now listen, he can also get away with saying that. You know, sometimes I think if a writer were to say that, they'd be like, "What? That's not an answer." But the one thing that I've always tried to do is that before I go to sleep, I try and spend at least 15 or 20 minutes reading something that is related to what we're working on, or reread like some pages of ours that we have. And then I'm telling you, there's been so many times where I've woken up and I'd be like, you know what we should do is this, because I'm convinced, and you know, I'm no scientist, but I'm convinced our brain is working on it while we sleep. Because I can't tell you the number of times I've woken up in the morning and my wife would be like, oh, you thought of something, didn't you? Or like, you have an idea. And so between like waking up and getting in the shower, like whatever problem of the day was the problem 2 days ago or the day before, it's like, you know, the answer will come to me. And I'm convinced, you know, our brains don't stop even while we're sleeping. And I think, just like they say, if you study before you sleep, it helps you, you know, back it up and memorize it. I think if you think about the problem, your brain will work on it as you sleep.
Yeah, I mean,
I could be crazy though. I mean,
I've woken up with lots of ideas, and you know, sometimes I'll go to bed listening to the same music that I would listen to if I was writing, you know, a certain project, if I'm having trouble with some sort of story problem, and that seems to help. And definitely like the shower, and something about like things like that, or driving, or even brushing my teeth or whatever, you know, all that habitual stuff that you're not thinking about, where your brain just gets to, you know, flow a little bit. It makes a huge difference.
You're in great company. Ernest Lehman, who's a screenwriter that, you know, just one of the old timers, but is just a really, you know, I'd read an interview that he had given. And, you know, he would say the shower, he would say driving to work. And what was interesting too, I had read that, that interview when, you know, we were starting out, and like, I was like really stressed out because I'm like, oh man, I'm sitting here and I got like, you know, half a page and I'm like, there's nothing here. I thought at that time that the writing was like, okay, 4 or 5 pages, whatever it was. And I was just, and then it just like really was just building, and I was getting more and more anxious. And, you know, I had, you know, quit, you know, my job on, you know, I'd worked for Oppenheimer. I was on their foreign equity desk, and I was like, what am I doing? This is insanity. And then I read that Ernest Lehman article, and he said, oh, that was writing. It was, you know, thinking about something in the shower, thinking about something as he was going for a walk. And that process was writing. And sometimes you write half a page, sometimes you write 5 pages, sometimes you write 1, 2, whatever it may be. But I remember just being relieved. I'm like, oh, because I started, you know, here was a guy that was nominated and won an Academy Award. And
right.
Oh, I think like that, oh, I agree with that. Oh, totally agree with that. Okay, I'm doing that. And it just felt so much, you know, there was a sense of relief, you know. I remember having that kind of, you know, it was like a big moment.
Yeah, it's good to be reminded that the process is just sometimes really weird.
On Killinger, there was a moment where like, oh, bro, we're kind of stuck here. And for like a week, we were kind of just like spinning our wheels.
In the beginning, it was more like 3 weeks, and we're like, why is this so fucking hard? We're like, we're just really struggling here. And we had like this one opening, then we had to change the opening, and it was like, and it was just like, it was a real. The thing I'm most proud of Killinger, and like it's one of those things too. That's another one when people read it, they're like, they really like it. It's a page turner. But what
It
most
is. It read fast, and I'm a slow reader, so I really appreciated that, by the way.
right. Well, you know what? You're in good company again. Spielberg's a slow reader. So, and I, you know, Charlie's a fast reader. I'm a slow reader. But again, I'm just so proud that we stuck through it, and we just kept, and we did the fucking hard work. Like there were different versions of that script where we changed a major character, and we did like some things, and I'm just so proud that we just stuck to it. And I feel, you know, and the finished product is one that I'm very proud of.
So was there a moment that it took you a while to find, to unlock the script, or?
Yeah, there were, like, as Charlie said, well, there's a couple of things. One, first, it was the beginning, and then then there was a good, like, you know, a kind of writing stretch, and then there was like another kind of, I think, moment where we couldn't figure out some things, and then we kind of wrote it. But it just reminds me of what Susanna Grant wrote, you know, the writer of Erin Brockovich. And it's so funny because I read an interview with her, and she has like a friend that she calls, and she does it every script, and she goes like 3/4, and she's like, I don't know how this is what I'm gonna do now, and I'm totally stuck. And no, this time I'm really stuck. I'm never gonna figure it out. And then, sure enough, she figures it out. And then again, she calls her friend and he's like, this one, I don't know how to figure this one out. So it's what all writers go through. I think, you know, I think that's helped us as we've gotten older too. Cause, like, you know, we get, you know, there might be a moment where we get stuck. We write every day. There's no, like, we've never gotten writer's block. We might be struggling with the scene or a character or something, but we're always writing. But, you know, now just because we've been through it, we're like, okay, yeah, you know, we'll figure it out somewhere, somehow we'll figure it out. And as Charlie said, I think it's very helpful to read some of those pages the night before, because I do think
That's cool.
is subconsciously, trying to figure something out. And whether you get the idea in the morning or in the shower that morning or on the way to work, you eventually, I think, get it.
Yeah, that's a smart strategy. Yeah, something on Killinger, by the way, that I just thought was really cool, and I'll cut this if you don't want it in the interview, but really thought it was, I didn't expect you to have Olivia kidnapped at the point when you did. You know, normally I feel like that would happen either at that kind of first act break or at the midpoint, right? And it happened in between those, and it just kind of made me think, okay, where is this thing going? And it gave it an energy that was really, really cool.
But at first it was that they kidnapped her boyfriend. And then it was like, no, it's, you know what? Why not have the boyfriend / husband die? And then that's who she's hallucinating about. And it's the daughter that's gone missing. Because then in a way, it's this whole family on this journey together.
I liked that too, actually, that you brought him back in through those hallucinations. I thought that worked really well.
We have to give credit. That was Derek, man. Derek said, listen, guys, he's like, this is what it should be. That,
Mama
okay,
Bear.
you have it.
Sorry, Derek who?
Kolstead.
Derek Kolstead, our producer.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Yeah, so the writer of John Wick.
I didn't realize he was producing on this. That's cool.
Oh, yeah, he's producing this, with, you know, along with Jay Van Hoy. And nice. So he goes, I got this idea. You guys can just, like, you know, take it for what it's worth. And he pitched that idea where, like, okay, the two agents are actually married together, and the person
together, they have a relationship.
They have a relationship together, and the person that should get kidnapped should be their daughter. And then we're like, oh, there it is. Like, that was really, you know, it just made sense on so many levels. And we're like, okay, we had to go back and just really implement that and really make that work. And it was just one of those great ideas. It's when you hear it, you're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And, you know, it worked on multiple levels.
Yeah, it played very well. That's good. So how long have you been working on Killinger?
Well, it's just been off and on between different projects.
Yeah.
You know, it's
not that long, you know, just whenever we get a shot.
Yeah. Okay. So
you know,
was Derek involved at the beginning? It was something that you had just kind of brought to him and worked on together, or how did that come together?
We wrote the first draft and we sent it to him, and he kind of had mentioned to us that he was in the time he was being offered an overall deal, a producing deal at a couple different places. And he had told us that he wanted to kind of segue into producing. And so we said, hey, would you want to read this and consider possibly producing it? And so he read it, and Sonia, his wife, read it. I think that helped too. And they were both on board. And And so then, you know, we said, all right, great. And he gave us notes, and we started doing rewrites for him and Jay. And then you just, you know, you get it, you try and bake it. You know, that's the other thing we've learned over the years. Is just like before, like, you know, like, oh, you're excited, you want to get it out there, you want to try and sell it. But we've learned now, just like take your time, listen, and just keep, you know, good notes you take and you put them because it makes the project better. And then things you know, you maybe don't think are applicable, it's okay to kind of, you know, just hear them out. Like we've just learned that it's like, just be open and just take notes and try and really listen and see what you can use that can help the project and make it better. And those were notes that made that script better. And you know, we're not afraid now to just keep doing rewrites, because we always tell young writers, what's great about rewriting is that the previous draft will always exist. That file is on your computer, so don't be precious. Like, you can go in there, you can try whatever notes they give you, and if it didn't work out and it doesn't work, you can always go right back to the other draft. Nothing happened to that. So don't be afraid to go in and try, because sometimes you find stuff and you're like, oh, you know, there are times where like we've heard notes and like, you know, inside you're like, oh, that's BS. Like, you know, we'll come out of it always in the meeting. We always say, we'll think about that. Oh, that's interesting. We'll think about that. Even if you hate it, you say, that's interesting. I'll think about it. And then on the walk back to the car, we'll be like, oh, that's ridiculous. We're never going to do that. And then the next day we'll be in the office, we'll be like, you know what? If we do what they're saying, and then like, oh, actually, no, that's actually a pretty good note. So we've learned now, never, like, unless it's like, but we don't say no to anything. We just say, we'll think about it. And sometimes it just takes a little time for you to soak it in.
You do yourself an incredible disservice if you don't listen to notes. You listen to every note, absolutely. And then it's the writer's job to kind of figure out, okay, what exactly is the note behind the note? What are they really trying to say? And then how do you remedy that, you know? And, you know, they may have a note and they may give you a solution and the solution's bad. It's up to the writer to come up with the correct solution. So yeah, we're very open to notes. And as Charley said, you know, a note might spark an idea. And the other good thing, you know, we learned from Chris Morgan, you know, he would say this, if someone gave him a note, he's like, yes, I can do that, but this is what will happen. So you never say no, you say yes, but this is what will happen. And you just talk them through it. And sometimes they'll be like, oh yeah, I see that. And they'll, you know, like, okay, yeah, disregard that. Or, you know, I still want you to try that. And that's fine too. But yeah, you do yourself an incredible disservice if you're obstinate and you just don't listen and you think you're above it all.
Quick way to burn bridges.
Absolutely too. And there's that too, you know, and we're not saying too, just to be a yes man, you know, again, I love that idea. Like, yes, but this is what will happen. And you fight for what you believe in, but you also listen. And it's a collaborative, you know, effort, you know, it's a communal kind of medium in many ways. And so that's just what it is. Charley says, like, if you want to just be a writer where you don't get rewritten, write a blog. And so I agree with that.
That's a good quote. I like that. Yeah, I mean, even if you're writing novels, you know, you're getting edited, and there's really there's no commercial form of writing where there isn't some sort of editing or collaboration or any of that. So, yeah. Do you ever find yourselves like pushing back on notes or just finding a way to keep your version of it, or?
We try to just make it work, you know. And again, you know, explain.
Well, you know, the one thing I'll say though, bro, because it is a balance, and I don't want, like, there's a very famous Greek saint that he said, no criticism should ever bother you, because either it's true and you should learn from it, or it's false and you shouldn't care. And so I don't want people to think that just like, oh, whatever notes they say, we have very strong opinions, and anyone that's worked with us, you know, they'll tell you we're willing to voice them. But what we've learned, I think, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, is just be humble and don't let your emotions get the best of you. And really just listen to what people are saying. Most people in this business are very smart. Now, that doesn't always equate to, like, you know, writing advice, but they're smart. And if they're saying something, just take the time to really think about why are they saying this. And one rule that we almost always have, now listen, there's different drafts for different people, but when we write a spec, we'll give it to 3 or 4 people. If one person says something, that might just be kind of their own subjective opinion. But if all 3 or 4 people are saying it, now it's become an objective observation, and we have to listen to it. And then also, listen, in features, if a director says, hey, this is the note, then like Vlas said, you do the Chris Morgan thing. Okay, but if we do that, that's going to have this ripple effect, and you walk them through that. And if they still say do it, then you just have to do the best job you can, because in features, they'll fire you if you don't do it.
Yep.
And so we do push back, but it's all about us being humble and not letting emotion get in the way of maybe, missing a note that could help your script. Because in the end, you just want to make the script as good as you can. And we've learned we're happy to pull ideas from wherever they come. And because in the end, we just want the script to be as strong as it can be. We try to give them a fair shake, because we've learned over the years that also helps us too. It's not even like, we're just trying to be saintly. It's like, it's just that this is good for the project, and this is part of the process. And so
the difference between a professional and an amateur too. You got to be a professional. That's also, there's that level. You have to be a professional, and we are guns for hire, in many ways. And it's also, part of the reason why we've loved to work in animation and in television. You get a little more say,
Sure.
there.
So I assume that means that you're going to be doing more TV stuff coming up, right?
God willing. Yeah, we love the space. If we were just to stay in animation
cool.
the rest of our career, we would love that. But
you'd be all right with that, huh? I mean,
oh yeah,
I can see why. You're off to a good start.
Thank you. But
so much fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and whatever presents itself, and just be open to anything and everything. And as Charley said, try to be as humble as we can be, and not rigid, and be like, and I think for me at least, and I think Charley feels the same way, it's also just passion. It's like, what are we passionate about? And I think that, passion's contagious, and usually good things happen when people are passionate. And so if we're passionate about a story, whatever story that may be, and it moves us emotionally, and we're just like, we just got to tell it, we're going to fight for that story, and we're going to fight to try to get that, made. And whether it's a TV show or a movie, whatever it may be, it's, passion. If we're passionate about it, we'll fight for it.
That's awesome. So you guys have told a couple Greek stories. Are you going to keep going down that path, you think? Or
we have tons of ideas, that take place in mythology. Part of that is one, it's a true passion. It's something we've always loved ever since we were little. Part of the reason why we wrote Immortals was because, truthfully, the first script we sold was a heist script. And we heard that they were remaking Clash of the Titans at Warner's, and we asked. That's back when OWAs, open writing assignments, and agents going through the grid was like actually a real thing back in 2006 and 2007. It doesn't exist nowadays.
Right.
And our agent said, like, oh well, they won't even consider you. I can't even get you guys a meeting because you don't have any world building samples. And we were like, Mike, come on, like,
wow,
we love Greek mythology. That's why we wrote Immortals. Yeah, it was like, we can write that. We grew up on this stuff. We love that stuff. And also too, with Immortals, we always, the draft that we sold for Immortals was $150 million. That's what the line producer came back with. And basically the studio said to us, like, if you can get this to 75 million, we'll make it. And basically we kind of, shared a look, and we talked with Tarzem, and we said, like, hey, let's try and see if we can figure this out. But even Tarzem said it. He goes, at that moment, because that was much more Lord of the Rings, more of this fantastical world that we did in Blood of Zeus. He goes, we're going to have to go from fantastical to fantastic. And so we had to like kind of strip out so many things, and it became a different process. And we're still proud of that. And we love Tarzem. He was a great guy, but that was just like a whole different thing. But that's what you do in this business. You always roll up your sleeves. You try and, be positive and try and funnel your passion into something that hopefully other people are excited about as well. You know what I mean? But yeah, so, we wrote that just because, they said, we can't even get you a meeting for this. And for us, again, being Greek, having grown up on these stories, spending summers, we lived in Greece for, a year and a half. It's like, guys, come on, like, and so that's why we wrote it.
Well, that's great. I love that that's the story behind Immortals. I had no idea about that. So that's super cool. Well, listen, I know I've taken up a good chunk of your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Really, really fun.
And super excited about all the success you're having with Blood of Zeus. I hope that means there's a lot more coming for you guys.
We appreciate it, and thank you for having us on, and good luck with the writing.
Hey,
keep us
have a great
updated.
night. Thanks very much.
You too. Take care,
Right.
Nate.
So super cool. A couple days after we talked, it was announced that Blood of Zeus was renewed for a second season. I could not be more happy for these guys. They are such great dudes and such great writers and so deserving of all of the success that they've had. And yeah, just absolutely incredible. You know, I found it really inspiring what students of the craft they are, even after all the success that they've had. They just dropped gems and quotes from writers and filmmakers throughout that entire conversation, many of which didn't even make it into the final cut. And I was just so impressed by their humility, you know, with all the success that they have, they still just love the learning process that much. So on the subject of learning, I thought since this is week 13 and I just finished the first draft and it's kind of like the halfway point for this whole series, I would maybe go through some of the big learning takeaways that I've had from doing this. So I've got a list of them, so don't mind me as I kind of look through my computer and read from them because there's no way I'm remembering all this off the top of my head. But one thing that I thought was really cool, everyone has a different writing process. There is no one way to do anything in this world at all, whether it's writing a script or breaking in. It is just, it's different for each person. There's no one path. And I think that that's a really good thing to remember. And I think it's an encouraging thing to remember. Also, everyone has had a lot of struggles. Basically, everybody I talked to has had some really, really, really low points of their career, often multiple low points. And you have really got to have the resilience to push through if you want to do this. And, you know, that's something that, as I've shared, was kind of a mistake that I made after I had broken that first time. But now I'm coming back into it a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and I'm ready to go. And so I'm really inspired and appreciative that everybody has shared those experiences, and just to be reminded that that is normal and it's part of the process of getting movies made. I chose a project that I was passionate about versus the most commercial, budget-conscious idea. Not regretting that at all. I'm really excited about the draft that I just wrote. There is a movie in there, and I can't wait to put it out there. I'm surprised at the number of great writers who do minimal outlining. I'd always thought that most screenwriters did like rigorous outlines, honestly, and it seems closer to half and half. So that was news to me. Character, character, character. Everything comes from the desires and the emotions of your characters. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. That is just so much more important than, you know, your plot points and your beats. You've got to have the characters right. Breaking things into chunks works, whether it's a big, long writing process and filming process like Reentry, or whether it is, you know, breaking your script up into crescendos of a symphony, or propping it up with big beats like tent poles. I also definitely realized I need to expand my film knowledge. I feel really outclassed in this way by most of the people that I've been speaking with. And, you know, although I don't necessarily need to be the most knowledgeable person in this area, I definitely need to expand on that. So, you know, that's something that's worth taking away. Also, Scrivener. So if you've been watching this, you know that I have written this script with Scrivener. It's the first time I've ever written one with that program. I bought that because I had gotten into writing short stories and was working on a novel, and it's a program designed for that, and it does it very, very, very well. And it's got a screenplay option. So I tried using that on the suggestion of a friend, and it's worked well, but there are a couple things that hiccup with it, a couple little glitchy things, a couple things it doesn't do as well as I would like. So my recommendation to you is, if you are new to screenwriting and already own Scrivener, use it. It totally works. It's absolutely fine. You'll have a well-formatted script at the end of the day, and that's great. If you need to buy a program, though, I think that you should probably go with Fade In. It's a lower cost than Final Draft. It's a one-time purchase, and I actually own a license of that, so I'm going to be switching back to that probably for every subsequent draft of ÆTHER and future scripts as well. Let's see. So, finally, I wanted to make a point of this. Kind of embarrassing I had to look back the list for it because it's just that obvious, but writers are fucking awesome people. Absolutely been blown away by all the help and support that I have received as I've been getting back into this game. And I only hope that I can pay that forward. I hope people are getting something out of this series. And, you know, I hope that I'm able to continue contributing to the writer community because I've just been so impressed by everybody. So thank you so much to everybody who has supported. So that's a pretty powerful 13 weeks. I can't wait to see, you know, what I discover in this next 13 or whatever it ends up being. Action steps for this week are really simple. Once again, read a script like normal and finish your first draft. Done. Like every week, I'm giving away a copy of Malice and Mistletoe signed by myself and by Jack Purcell. So if you want a shot at winning this week's copy, then, you know, drop your favorite writing quote into the comments below and I'll pick one of you and send it your way. So that's what I've got for week 13. All my gratitude to all the writers who have supported and given me advice along the way. Thank you so much. And also thank you to everybody who has checked this out and supported the series. It's been really cool and really fun to do. Up next week, I will see you with Matt Altman, another great writer. He does action incredibly well, so I'll definitely be talking to him about that. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss it, and smash cut to black.